You passed the challenge after everything it took to get there. The failed attempts, the fees, the sessions where you followed your rules so carefully, it felt like holding your breath for 30 days. You passed. The email arrived, the funded account was activated, your name was attached to real capital that wasn't yours to fund. And then within 48 hours, something went wrong maybe. It was subtle at first. A position size slightly larger than your challenge rules required, justified by the thought that now you have room to breathe. Maybe it was a trade taken before your criteria were fully met, justified by the thought that the market was moving and you'd waited long enough. Maybe it was a sequence that started clean and deteriorated quietly trade by trade until you were operating in a way that bore almost no resemblance to the trader who passed the challenge, and the drawdown that eventually hit wasn't a surprise so much as a recognition that you had known somewhere underneath the activity that something had shifted from the moment you opened the funded account. Or maybe it wasn't subtle. Maybe you sat down on day one with a specific number in your head, the first payout, the amount that would make this real, the proof that this was working, and that number pulled every decision toward it with a gravity that your process was never designed to resist. Maybe you were at 2% profit by noon and you pushed for 3. Maybe you were at 3 and you pushed for 5. Maybe this session that should have ended at lunchtime continued into the afternoon, and the afternoon's losses gave back the morning's gains, and the urgency to recover before the day closed did what urgency always does. Whatever the specific shape of it was for you, the result was the same. A funded account that should have represented the beginning of something became instead another data point in a pattern you don't fully understand yet. I want to start there with the pattern because understanding why this keeps happening to traders who clearly have enough skill to pass the challenge is the only way to stop it from happening again. Before we go any further, tell me something honest. When your funded account was activated in the first minutes after you logged in and saw the capital there with your name on it, what was the first feeling that arrived? Not what you told yourself you felt, the actual first feeling. Comment one word below, because that first feeling before any conscious narrative formed around it is the most accurate indicator of the psychological state you walked into the funded account with. And that state, I want to show you, is the most important variable in whether the next 48 hours go well or catastrophically. Here is the first thing you need to understand, and it is something almost nobody in the prop firm space explains clearly. Passing the challenge and being ready to trade a funded account are not the same thing. They are related. You cannot have one without the other, but they are not equivalent. And the gap between them is not a gap in skill or strategy. It is a gap in psychological context. And psychological context is we are going to examine in specific detail changes behavior in ways that are profound, predictable, and almost entirely invisible to the trader experiencing them. During the challenge, the psychological context was defined by a specific set of pressures. A profit target, a drawdown limit, a clock. You were working towards something within boundaries against time. That context goal-directed, constraint-bounded, time-pressured is actually a psychologically organizing context. It gives every session a clear structure. It gives every trade a clear place within that structure. It makes the question, should I take this trade, answerable in terms that are external and defined rather than internal and vague. Does this trade fit my criteria? Yes or no? Does taking it keep me within my daily loss limit? Yes or no? Do I still have enough trading days to reach the target without taking excessive risk? Yes or no? The funded account removes that structure almost entirely. There is still a maximum drawdown, there are still rules, but there is no profit target pulling you forward, no deadline creating daily urgency, no challenge fee already spent that makes each trade feel like it needs to justify its existence within a finite window. The funded account is psychologically an open field, and an open field without the organizing structure of a goal and a clock is not the calming relief most traders expect it to be. It is disorienting, and disorientation in the absence of a clear organizing structure does not produce patient, process-driven behavior. It produces the search for a new organizing structure, and the one most traders unconsciously reach for in the absence of the challenge's external structure is the payout target. The payout target becomes the new profit target. The first withdrawal threshold becomes the new clock. and suddenly you're trading a funded account with exactly the same urgency-driven, target-focused psychology that caused your worst challenge sessions, except now there is no drawdown limit calibrated to protect you from yourself at the scale the funded account operates at. This is the first mechanism behind the 48-hour blow-up, not recklessness, not greed in the simple sense. The automatic, unconscious replacement of one organizing structure with another, and the failure to recognize that the new structure is producing the same psychological pressures that nearly derailed the challenge, now operating on a larger account with higher absolute stakes. Let's go deeper into what is actually happening in your nervous system in the first hours of a funded account, because the physiology matters here in a way most traders have never considered. You have just experienced a significant achievement passing a prop firm challenge, particularly after previous failed attempts, produces a genuine neurological event. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter most associated with reward anticipation and motivational drive, floods the system in response to the achievement. This feels like confidence, like momentum, like the sense that things are finally working. And it is real. It is not manufactured or imagined. Your nervous system is genuinely in a reward state. The problem is that a reward state neurologically is not a cautious state. The same dopamine surge that produces the confidence and momentum of achievement also produces a specific cognitive bias, the tendency to overestimate the probability of positive future outcomes and underestimate the probability of negative ones. In ordinary life, this bias is often useful. It sustains motivation through difficulty. It makes people attempt things they might not rationally calculate as achievable in trading. It is dangerous. Specifically, it is dangerous in the first hours and days after a significant achievement because it means you're entering the funded account in a state that is neurologically calibrated toward optimism and action in a domain. Trading that requires calibration toward neutrality and patience. The overconfidence is not a character flaw. It is a neurological state, and like the threat activation state that drives revenge trading, it degrades the specific cognitive functions that sound trading requires, not because you're less intelligent, but because the brain systems running loudly in a reward state are not the systems responsible for careful, rule-governed, long-term thinking. This is why the traders who navigate the first 48 hours of a funded account most successfully are not the ones who feel the most confident going in. They are the ones who recognize the confidence itself as a signal requiring management the same way a thermostat recognizes heat as a signal requiring correction, not suppressing the confidence, recognizing it as a state that needs to be compensated for rather than acted on. I want to check in with you here, and I want an honest answer when you look back at the specific trades you took in the first 48 hours of your funded account. The ones that led to the drawdown, were they larger than your challenge position sizes or smaller? Comment larger, same, or smaller below, because the answer to that question tells me something very specific about which of the mechanisms I'm describing was most active in your situation. And the pattern across different traders' answers is more instructive than any single case. Here's the third mechanism, and it is the one that is least discussed and most determinative. When you were trading the challenge, you were trading in a way that was at some level supervised not by the firm watching your every move in real time, but by the awareness that your performance was being evaluated. That evaluation created a specific kind of psychological accountability that influenced your behavior in ways you probably didn't consciously register, but that were genuinely significant. The evaluation context meant that each trade carried an implicit audience. The firm was going to see the results, the drawdown would be recorded, the trading days would be counted, even if you never consciously thought about it in those terms. Some part of your decision-making was calibrated to the awareness that this session's output would be assessed. The funded account removes that evaluation context in a specific and psychologically significant way. You are no longer being evaluated for access to capital, you have the capital. The firm is no longer assessing whether you deserve it. They have already concluded that you do. And without the evaluation context, a very specific kind of behavioral drift becomes possible that the challenge structure prevented. That drift is the gradual relaxation of your own standards when no external accountability is present. Not a dramatic lowering of standards, a subtle one. A slightly earlier entry here, a slightly larger size there. A setup taken that was close to your criteria rather than precisely on them, justifiable in the moment. Forgettable by the end of the session, but constituting a real deviation from the process that produced the challenge pass. This drift is not laziness. It is the predictable behavior of any human being operating without the organizing pressure of external evaluation. Research on self-regulation is consistent on this point. People maintain higher behavioral standards when they believe they are being observed than when they believe they are not. Not because they are performing for the observer, because the awareness of observation activates a more careful, more deliberate mode of processing that produces better quality decisions. The intervention here is not pretending the firm is watching you more closely than they are. It is creating an internal evaluation structure that is as robust as the external one the challenge provided. A pre-session written intention that functions as the standard you're accountable to. A post-session audit that asks not just what happened, but whether what happened met the standard you set before the session. An identity as a trader that includes as a genuine feature the commitment to executing the same process in private that produced the results that earned the funded account in public. That internal evaluation structure is what the traders who survive their funded accounts have developed explicitly or implicitly before they receive the capital. And the traders who blow the funded account in the first 48 hours are almost always the ones who are still relying on external structure to maintain behavioral standards that have not yet been genuinely internalized. Now, I want to talk about something more specific, the particular 48-hour window and why it is when it is rather than later. The first 48 hours of a funded account represent a unique confluence of three factors that almost never occur simultaneously at any other point in a trading career. The first is peak psychological activation from the achievement of passing. As I described earlier, the dopamine surge of accomplishment is at its highest in the immediate aftermath of the goal's completion. After 48 to 72 hours, it begins to normalize as the achievement becomes familiar rather than new. The second is minimum established behavioral routine. Your trading habits on the funded account are 0 days old. You have no established pattern of how you behave on this account. No accumulated evidence of what your process looks like here. No experienced sense of what a normal session feels like. Every decision is being made in a context that is both new and high stakes simultaneously, which is one of the most cognitively demanding combinations available. The third is maximum gap between expectation and behavioral readiness. The funded account is the thing you are working toward. It has been in your mental model, the threshold beyond which trading becomes real, meaningful, different from what it was before. And the expectation of difference, of things being meaningfully better or meaningfully more significant, creates a pressure to perform that is entirely absent from the challenge, where performing well was a prerequisite for arrival rather than an obligation of being here. Together, these three factors create a window in which your decision-making is more vulnerable to distortion than at almost any other point in your trading development. And the distortions it produces are specific and recognizable once you know what to look for. You take a trade larger than your process specifies because the funded account feels like it should produce a result worth talking about. You take a second trade in a setup category where your rules say 1 per session because the first one was a loser, and the funded account context makes the loss feel more significant than it statistically is. Each of these is the same mechanism wearing a different costume. The funded account's psychological weight is distorting the cost-benefit calculation at the level of individual decisions, making larger sizes feel appropriate, longer sessions feel justified, and marginal setups feel valid. The correction is not willpower applied against these distortions in real time. It is the deliberate reduction of the funded account's psychological weight before the session begins, and that reduction is achieved through one specific reframe that I want to give you now. The funded account is not a different category of trading. It is the same process, the same criteria, the same risk parameters, and the same behavioral standards applied to a number with more zeros. That is all it is. Not a new game with new rules, not a validation of capability that now grants latitude the challenge didn't allow the same process. Different scale, write that down before your next session. Not as an affirmation, as an operational definition of what the funded account actually is. Because the 48-hour blow-up in almost every case begins with the unconscious belief that the funded account is something qualitatively different from the challenge, and ends with the discovery at considerable cost that the market treats both exactly the same. Here is what the first week of a funded account should actually look like. And I want to be specific about this because most traders have no clear picture of it before they arrive there. The first session of the funded account, you trade smaller than your maximum allowed size. Not because you lack confidence, because you're acknowledging honestly that you are in a new context with maximum psychological activation and minimum established routine, and that this is precisely the combination that demands reduced exposure rather than expanded ambition. You are protecting the account from the version of yourself that is most likely to make poor decisions, and that version is the one that shows up in the first session of a funded account more reliably than at almost any other time. The first week, your only performance metric is process compliance, not profit, not payout progress, not percentage toward any target. Did you follow your criteria on every trade? Did you honor your position sizing rules? Did you end sessions when your session rules required it? That is the entirety of what you're evaluating in week one. The profit will follow from the process if the process is sound. The process is what you can actually control at the end of each session in the first week. You conduct a brief written audit, 3 questions. Did I trade the same process that passed the challenge? If not, at what specific point did the first deviation occur? What was the state that produced the deviation? Not the justification I built around it, but the actual psychological state that preceded it. That audit, conducted consistently across the first week, will reveal something that no amount of pre-session intention setting can reveal. The specific conditions under which your funded account behavior diverges from your challenge behavior. That information is worth more than any single winning trade the first week could produce, because it tells you precisely where the vulnerability lives in your specific psychology in this specific context so that you can address it before it addresses the account. And before every session in that first week, 1 question written down and answered honestly before the platform opens. Am I here to trade my process, or am I here to prove something? If the honest answer is to prove something to the firm, to someone in your life, to yourself, to the version of you that failed previous challenges, you reduce your size by half and you trade the first half of your normal session length only. Not as punishment, as acknowledgement. The need to prove something is a real psychological state, and it produces real behavioral distortions, and the appropriate response to it is reducing exposure until the state resolves rather than pretending it isn't there. Here is where I want to leave you, because I think it matters more than the protocol. You passed the challenge because you spent 30 days operating from a specific psychological place, a place of process focus, of criteria discipline, of respecting the rules you had set for yourself when you were calm enough to set them well. That place is not a version of yourself that only exists during challenges. It is the version of yourself you're capable of being in any trading context when the context isn't actively working against the access to it. The funded account's first 48 hours work against that access, not maliciously, simply by virtue of what they are: a new, high-stakes, psychologically loaded context arriving at the moment of peak achievement activation. The blow-up doesn't happen because you suddenly became a worse trader. It happens because the context changed in ways that make the psychological place you need to trade from harder to access at exactly the moment you need to access it most, knowing that specifically, precisely in the terms we've been using in this video, changes what you do with it. You don't try to be more disciplined. You design the first week of the funded account to actively lower the contextual barriers to accessing the process focus state that the challenge produced. Smaller initial size, process-only metrics, daily audits, the single pre-session question, these are not tips. They are structural compensations for predictable psychological pressures designed by the calm version of you for the activated version of you to be used precisely when the activated version is least capable of designing them in real time. The 48-hour blow-up is not inevitable. It just requires understanding it specifically enough to prepare for it honestly. Comment below before you go 1 sentence about what you would do differently in the first 48 hours of your next funded account based on everything you've just heard, not what you wish you had done, what you will actually do. Because the gap between those 2 things is exactly where the work lives.